Hi, welcome back to my discourses on the Chevalier of St. George. When I last left off with the Chevalier of St. George, he had lost a bid to become the director of the Royal Academy of Music because of his color, and some writers believe it was this incident that convinced him to back the Republicans, the ones who spearheaded the French Revolution. But even his early correspondences show that right from the beginning, even though he was reared an aristocrat, he never forgot where he came from or who his real people really were, and he always identified with the people of his mother. Even so, he did not let his emotions override his conscience. Fully aware of the brutality of the leaders of the French Revolution and morally opposed to their methods, in spite of what Marie Antoinette had done to him, one day while skating at Versailles, he came close to the box where the queen was sitting, and with his skates he scratched out on the ice the German word for peril to warn her of her imminent danger at the hands of the Republicans. Now, Marie Antoinette was actually from Austria, and German was her native tongue. St. George, aware of this, communicated to her in this language so as not to arouse the suspicions of her French countrymen. Marie Antoinette was so touched by this that she later publicly apologized to him for having sided against the Royal Academy of Music in that incident. Nonetheless, when the French Revolution came about, St. George committed himself to it 100%. He went back to the West Indies and came back to France with a regiment of black cavalry, which he called the Black Legion. You remember I talked about this unit in my discourse on Alexandre Dumas, the general. And if you heard that lecture, you might remember that he appointed Alexandre Dumas the lieutenant colonel of that regiment. It was St. George and Dumas together who kept the city of Lille from falling into the hands of, who kept Lille from falling out of the hands of the Republicans. Now, the two of them proved themselves unbeatable in the war against the Prussians. Later on, however, when the French Revolution really started getting underway and its leaders started getting demented, he was thrown into prison due to his royal lineage and condemned to death. As he was being led up to the steps of the guillotine, the counter-revolutionists, who ended up winning, rushed up and saved him in a Hollywood-like scene. Now, disheartened by this experience, he retired from public life entirely. His father had left him an annuity, which by today's standards would have been worth about $150,000. But this he spent helping to finance the revolution, and he was left to just face poverty. On June 12th, 1799, he died from his bladder trouble, the same trouble that might have caused him to decline the challenge from Alexandre Dumas. His death was the talk of France, and it was written up in all the newspapers. St. George was so many things that it's hard to put him into a frame that could encompass everything that he really was. The best description I could find for him was the one that was given to the great Paul Robeson, who came many centuries later, and whom I'll talk about much later. That description was all-round genius. That St. George was an all-round genius cannot be denied, but to me, he was an all-round artist. An artist to me is anyone who can so totally immerse himself into whatever task he's doing so as to be completely emotionally taken over by it to the point where he can extend his emotions to all those who are observing or listening to him or to his works, to the point where they, like him, begin to feel like they're a part of the thing that they are actually observing. Now, people like this have visited us very rarely throughout our history because they're a gift from God, and God does not give gifts unless they have a purpose. And this is why I have this section on my website. Because every one of these people were given to us for a purpose, and that purpose was a message from God telling us not to judge how they were born, but by how they were able to live. And this is what I'm trying to reach everybody with. Well, you know, a street in Paris, the Rue de Saint George, was named in honor of this man.